heard her scream before I saw her fall. The rain was violent that night, pounding the cracked pavement like fists. I ran to my window and there she was, collapsed on her knees in the middle of the street, soaking wet, her hands pressed against her face. 4 small shadows huddled around her, crying. The neighbors? They stood on their porches, arms crossed, watching. Not one of them moved to help. Red and blue lights painted the houses. The police cruiser rolled forward slowly, like a predator circling prey. I pressed my palm against the cold glass and whispered the question that still haunts me. How can a neighborhood destroy the very woman who carried so much alone? That was the night I realized I never really knew her. The woman who lived 3 houses down, the woman we all whispered about, the woman whose children played in our streets while she worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford new shoes. Her name was Elena, and what they did to her, what we did to her, God forgive us. I was 7 years old when I first noticed her. She wore a yellow sundress that day, faded but clean, and she was hanging laundry in her front yard. Her children played nearby, 4 of them, all under 10. The oldest, a girl with dark braids, helped fold towels. The youngest, barely 3, sat in the dirt making mud pies. Elena moved like she was dancing, even though there was no music. Her hands were quick, efficient, but her face, even them, I remember thinking, her face looked tired. Beautiful, yes, high cheekbones, deep brown eyes, full lips, but exhausted in a way that made her seem older than she was. My mother stood beside me at our kitchen window. "That poor woman," she whispered. "Why is she poor, Mama?" My mother's lips tightened. "Because she made choices, mija. Bad choices." Even at 7, I knew that wasn't the whole truth, but I nodded anyway. What I didn't know then, what none of us children understood, was that Elena skipped lunch every single day so her kids could have seconds at dinner. She wore the same 3 outfits on rotation, while her children had clean school uniforms. She cried herself to sleep every night, after checking their homework, kissing their foreheads, and praying they'd never know how close they were to losing everything. The yellow dress? It was the only pretty thing she owned, and she wore it like armor. It started with Mrs. Dominguez. She lived next door to Elena and had opinions about everything. One afternoon, I heard her talking to my mother over coffee. 4 children. 4! And not one father in sight? My mother lowered her voice. I heard she was married once. Once? Try 3 times, maybe 4. Who can keep track? They both laughed, that ugly laugh adults make when they pretend they're not being cruel. And those kids, Mrs. Dominguez continued, they don't all look alike, do you notice? Different fathers, obviously. She probably doesn't even know. "Elena!" someone screamed from outside. We all rushed to the window. Elena stood in her driveway, holding a piece of paper. Her hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. Her face had gone completely white. One of her children, the oldest girl, tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, what does it say?" Elena crumpled the paper against her chest and pulled all 4 children inside. The door slammed shut. Mrs. Dominguez smiled. "Wonder what that was about." I pressed my face against the window, watching Elena's house. The curtains were drawn, the lights stayed off, even as the sun set. Something had changed, and that was only the beginning. I couldn't sleep that night. Around midnight, I crept to my window and looked out. Elena's house was dark, except for one small light in the kitchen. I could see her silhouette through the thin curtains, hunched over the table, shoulders shaking. She was sobbing, not the quiet kind of crying, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and broken, the kind that sounds like a wounded animal. I watched for maybe 10 minutes. Then she stood up, walked to the sink, and splashed water on her face. When she turned back toward the window, I saw her expression clearly. Pure, devastating fear. What was she so afraid of? The next morning, I asked my mother if I could bring cookies to Elena and her children. Absolutely not, my mother snapped. We don't associate with people like that. People like what? Complicated people, mija. Now finish your breakfast. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. The woman who cried alone. The woman who smiled at her children even when her world was falling apart. The woman who wore a yellow dress like it could save her. Within a week, everyone on our street had a theory. She's hiding from someone. She stole money from her last job. One of those kids isn't even hers. She kidnapped it. I heard she was involved with dangerous men. Drugs, has to be drugs. She's running from the law. The crueler the rumor, the faster it spread. And Elena? She said nothing. She kept her head down, worked her 3 jobs, walked her children to school every morning, and ignored the stares. But I saw the changes. She stopped hanging laundry in the front yard. She started looking over her shoulder constantly. She installed a chain lock on her door. I heard it rattle every time she opened it. And her children, they stopped playing outside. One afternoon, I saw the youngest boy standing at their window, pressing his small hands against the glass. He looked so sad, so trapped. Mama, I asked, why won't anyone help her? My mother didn't look up from her magazine. Some people are beyond help, mija. But what if she's not bad? What if everyone is wrong? Then she should defend herself, speak up, tell the truth. But what if the truth was too dangerous to tell? 2 weeks later, a black car pulled up in front of Elena's house. A man got out. Tall, dark suit, sunglasses even though it was cloudy. He knocked on her door 3 times, hard, aggressive knocks that echoed down the street. Elena answered. I could see her face through the crack in the door. Pure terror. They spoke for maybe 2 minutes. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see her shaking her head, backing away. He stepped forward. She tried to close the door. He put his hand on it, holding it open. Then one of her children appeared behind her, the oldest girl. The man's entire demeanor changed. He stared at the girl for a long moment, then nodded slowly and walked back to his car. Before he drove away, he looked directly at Elena's window and pointed. A warning. Elena slammed the door and collapsed against it. Through the window, I watched her slide down to the floor, her hands covering her face.
The oldest girl knelt beside her mother and wrapped her small arms around her neck. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run over there and demand to know what was happening. But I was just a child, and children, we're told, should mind their own business. So I did nothing. And that was my first betrayal. Years passed. I grew up, went to college, moved away. But I never forgot Elena. When I came back to visit my mother, I always drove past that house. It had been abandoned for years, boarded up, forgotten, just like her. One afternoon, I parked in front of it and stared at the peeling paint, the overgrown yard, the broken mailbox. I don't know what made me get out of the car. Maybe guilt, maybe curiosity, maybe the ghost of that 7-year-old girl who watched from her window and did nothing. I walked up to the porch. The front door was hanging off its hinges. Inside, everything was destroyed. Furniture overturned, walls covered in graffiti, trash everywhere. But in the kitchen, tucked behind a loose floorboard, I found something. A shoebox. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to Elena. Some opened, some still sealed. And at the bottom, a photograph. 4 children, different ages, smiling at the camera. On the back, in shaky handwriting, If anything happens to me, please tell them I loved them. Tell them everything I did was to keep them safe. Tell them the truth. My hands started shaking. The truth? What truth? I opened the first letter with trembling fingers. The letter was from a woman named Maria. Dear Elena, I know you think you're protecting her by doing this. I know you believe this is the only way. But you can't keep living this lie. You can't keep sacrificing yourself for my mistakes. She's my daughter, not yours. And he knows it now. He's been looking for years and he finally found us. That's why I'm begging you. Let me take her back. Let me face him alone. Don't let him destroy your life the way he destroyed mine. You've already given up everything. Your reputation, your peace, your chance at a normal life. You took my child and raised her as your own so I could escape. You told everyone she was yours so he wouldn't find us. But now he knows and he's coming. Please, Elena, save yourself. Save your real children. Let me handle this. I love you, hermana. You're the bravest person I know. Maria.
I dropped the letter. Oh, God. Oh, my God. The oldest girl, the one with the dark braids, the one who didn't quite look like the others. She wasn't Elena's daughter. She was her sister's daughter, and Elena had been hiding her, protecting her, taking all the blame, all the rumors, all the cruelty, so her sister could escape an abusive man, a dangerous man, a man who was hunting them both. I tore through the other letters. They told the story in fragments. Maria had married young. The man turned violent. She got pregnant. She tried to leave. He threatened to kill them both. Elena helped her escape, but the only way to do it was for Elena to take the baby and claim it as her own, to scatter a trail of lies, to become the target instead. So Maria could disappear, start over, live. And Elena? She became a single mother overnight. Then she had 3 more children with a man who eventually left her, and she raised all 4 children alone, working herself to the bone while the entire neighborhood called her irresponsible, reckless, immoral. She never defended herself, never told the truth, because the truth would have endangered Maria, would have led that violent man straight to her sister. So she carried the burden alone. She let the world hate her. She became the villain in everyone's story, so her sister could be safe. I finally understood. The night it rained. The man in the black suit, he'd found the oldest girl. He'd figured it out, and he'd come to take her back. Not because he loved her, but because she was his property, his way of controlling Maria. Elena refused to let him have her. So he called the police. He claimed Elena had kidnapped the child. He had documents, he said, proof that the girl wasn't hers. He demanded she be removed immediately. That's why the police came. That's why Elena was on her knees in the rain, screaming. That's why the neighbors watched and did nothing. They thought she deserved it. They thought justice was finally being served. But they didn't know the truth. And by the time anyone figured it out, it was too late. Elena lost the girl. The man took her, and 3 days later, Maria's body was found in a river 2 states away. The man had used the girl to lure Maria out of hiding, and he'd killed her. I sat on the floor of that abandoned house, surrounded by letters, and I wept. For Elena, for Maria, for that little girl, for the 3 children who lost their mother because she was too busy saving everyone else, for the neighborhood that destroyed a hero because they were too blind to see one. I found Elena 2 years ago. She's living in a small apartment across town. The 3 younger children are grown now. They visit her often. They know the truth, and they love her fiercely. But the oldest girl, she's lost. The system failed her. She ended up in foster care, then aged out, then disappeared. No one knows where she is, and Elena blames herself. I should have told the truth, she whispered when I finally worked up the courage to visit her. I should have trusted people to understand. They wouldn't have. I was there. I saw them. They didn't want to understand. She smiled, that same tired, beautiful smile from the yellow dress. Maybe, but at least I would have tried. I think about Elena every day, about the woman who sacrificed her reputation, her peace, her entire life to protect her sister and a child that wasn't even hers, about the neighborhood that called her irresponsible when she was actually the most responsible person any of us had ever met, about the cruelty we inflict on people whose stories we don't bother to learn. Some heroes don't wear capes. They wear faded yellow dresses. They skip meals so their children can eat. They work 3 jobs and smile through exhaustion. They cry alone at midnight and wake up at dawn to do it all over again. They carry secrets that could destroy them, but they carry them anyway because love demands it. And sometimes the world punishes them for it. Elena taught me that the cruelest thing we can do to someone is assume we know their story, that judgment without understanding is just another form of violence, that sometimes the people we condemn are actually the ones saving us. I was 7 years old when I first saw her in that yellow dress. I'm 34 now, and I finally understand what my mother meant when she said Elena was complicated. She wasn't complicated. She was extraordinary, and we were all just too small to see it.